In just a few moments, we will pray together the prayers of the people, as we do each and every Sunday. There is always, in an Episcopal church, in that section of prayers, prayers for those who've asked for our prayers, those we know in the community who are living with either some kind of challenge in their life or some glorious time of gratitude in their life. And the way we do that here, we have an extensive prayer list. So when you came in, I'm sure the ushers were busy handing out little cards to, I don't know how many of you, that have a list of names on them. And when we get there, we all pray those names. They come up, they sound like a cacophony to us, but to the angels in the court of heaven, to which our prayers rise, it comes across each and every word preciously prayed. One of those names that you have been praying for in that cacophony for 6 years is a young man named Will. Will Edwards was born 6 years ago. He lost his twin sister when both of them were born prematurely. And Will himself had a bunch of health conditions that he's been living with. One of them is that in order for other parts of his physiognomy to be formed correctly, he's had a tracheotomy his entire life until Friday. And on Friday, it was removed. For the moment, Will is in an induced coma because there's much recovery to do, and it's a long and challenging recovery. But this young man has already had a long life of dealing with the medical conditions he has. I remember, actually, a couple of weeks after Will was born, being in the hospital with his mom and dad, Juanita and Ross, when the doctors said to them, he has this long list of physical challenges, and you are going to have to bear a lot in the first years of his life. But we think if things go as we hope they will, by the time Will is 5 or 6, if you can put in those years of special time, by the time he's 5 or 6, he should be launched on a normal life. And here he is, 6, and this amazing surgery that we've waited for now for 2 or 3 years. So it's a wonderful journey. I mention this because, first of all, you have, consciously or not, been praying for Will all these years. And, of course, he continues to need your prayers, especially over the next month of recovery. But I'm mentioning him in particular because he's a great example of how much parents are willing, ready, and able to do for their children. Extraordinary amounts of energy, time, commitment, and not just for Will, for every kid, money goes into taking a child from infancy and helping that child get to successful adulthood. And it's not just mums and dads. In Will's case, he's been surrounded by his mom and dad's best friends who've supported the family throughout this 6 years in extraordinary ways. Will has had his church family, especially the 745 community, which knows the Edwards more intimately than we do, since that's the mass they go to. And that community is tight around Will and claims him as their own. He's had the medical community and all of the people who've been concerned for his physical well-being. He's had extended family. And, thank God, he's had good health insurance. Please remember that when you think of other things. He's had the support of both his mom and dad's places of work, who have understood the extraordinary demands that are being placed on him in these years. Just imagine, and that's just the tip of the iceberg of the support that this young man has had. But all of our kids have that. Everyone in this room is a mom or a dad, a grandma or a grandpa, an aunt or an uncle. Everyone in this room has provided, if for no other reason in your pledge, ways for kids to be well brought up in the city of Chicago, to have a safe and excellent place to come on Sunday mornings for formation as a whole human being. Everyone in this room cares for and ensures that the children you know in your life, in whatever way you can participate, are encouraged and nurtured to become the best adults they can be. How many of us would take a knife and threaten the life of that child? And yet that's our story this morning in Scripture. One of the most significant and important stories in one of the most significant and important family lives in our faith tradition. Far from sacrificing for his child, Abraham believed that God asked him to actually sacrifice the child. It's been one of the most consternating, confusing, and challenging stories that we share within Christianity and with all of our Jewish brothers and sisters. How can this be? I actually love this story, and I think it's very important, and so did the authors of the book of Genesis. They carried it in the tradition, even though, even perhaps to ancient eyes, it seemed weird and consternating. Although, of course, Moses grew up in a society in which children were sacrificed on a regular basis. And it's very likely, as many biblical archaeologists suggest, that he was simply believing that he should do for Yahweh what his neighbors were doing for their various gods and goddesses. And yet, it survived as a story held up within Judaism as one of the pivotal stories of our father in faith. Abraham is the first to claim that he knew God as Yahweh within him. He has become, of course, the father of three great religious traditions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. He is the first to walk with God, to mystically be aware that a God he cannot see, a God he cannot create an image of, a God who does not speak in any language except the mystical language that bubbles up from deep within us. And he was committed to having faith in, with, and for Yahweh. He knew in his burgeoning and early faith, a faith that is 3,000 years old now, that this new faith emerging had to include within it somehow the idea of sacrifice. Sacrifice remains essential to the religious mindset and the soulful journey. And it doesn't matter whether you're a Jew, a Christian, or a Muslim. Sacrifice is essential to a relationship with Yahweh. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you know, but the very word Islam means submit. And of course, that means submit to Allah. We don't think about sacrifice and submission very much in modern America. We think about developing self-confidence, self-assurance, accumulating enough economic well-being that we can participate in the fullness of life. As a matter of fact, I once had a professor in seminary who said, we're in danger of converting the idea of baptism with water to baptism of independent adult economic life. When you think that the goal of a Christian is to be able to serve others or to make contributions to not-for-profit help organizations, if that's what you think Christianity is, then you're saying that the entrance into Christianity is to become an economically independent, emotionally secure household within the community. That's what you have to do first. All those are good things, by the way. But without the idea of sacrifice, we tend to accumulate and amass and clutch and cling to all the things that we have acquired. Our independent personality, our form of making ourselves financially secure. And it's Abraham and everyone in the tradition from him to this day who have shown us that Christianity holds these things to be good, but we must hold them with open palms, not grasping clutches, but open palms, so that what we have we know comes from God, is of God, and will return to God. And the biggest surprise of all is that when we learn to be sacrificial in our life, when we learn to let go, give up, cede, be offerings to others, when we do these things, we do not lose, which is, of course, our great fear. If I give of myself, it will be gone. If I allow myself to be generous, people will take advantage. If I spend my life not clinging to what I have, but what God could be for me, then I will lose even what I do have. After all, look what happened to him. But the surprise is that when we learn to give of ourselves because of God, when we learn to sacrifice to others because we are standing with God, when we learn that we can make our lives as offerings to the world around us and the people we share it with because we stand with Jesus, we discover that not only do we not lose what we have, but that we gain our own selves back. Obviously, I'm not going to go into what you heard in the reading from the delicious reading from Romans that Megan read for us, but that is what Paul is saying. That's practically the whole epistle to the Romans, one of the most difficult pieces of literature in all of human history. That's what it basically comes down to. Paul has discovered that in giving his life over to God, he didn't lose it. He got it back in richer, deeper, and more fabulous ways. In today's gospel, Jesus asks us to do just the simplest of things, to make a cold cup of water available to someone who needs it. It sounds so simple, we wonder why we don't do it as a lifestyle. But Jesus knows that to be the person who offers the cup of water graciously, openly, and full of gratitude is someone who knows sacrifice.